The stock market will crash at some point in the future. We just don't know when. It could happen this year, in 5 years, or even 10 years. Nobody has the crystal ball. And for retirees, market uncertainty can bring a lot of stress and often leads to fear of running out of money. And when markets do crash, many retirees end up holding on to their money and avoid spending because they don't want to sell their investments that are down 10, 20, even 30%, which I get. But what if you could eliminate the fear around market uncertainty and structure your portfolio in a way that allows you to spend and enjoy retirement no matter what the markets are doing? In this video, we'll discuss a portfolio strategy designed to mitigate market risk, prevent you from selling your investments in market downturns, and ensure a steady income stream throughout your entire retirement. When you hit retirement, there's this big transition from save, save, save to spend, spend, spend. The problem with spending money is, where do you draw that money from to spend it? So step one is obviously get a plan in place and understand how much money from what bucket. But the underlying problem here is, okay, I know I need to pull $30,000 from my RSP or my RIF, but I like all my investments. Like, what do I sell to get the income? Of course, for most of us watching this video, the reality is we've built up our nest egg and we're at the peak. When we hit retirement, our nest egg, our investable assets, we're at the peak of the mountain. And what happens during retirement is we spend down that mountain over time, meaning that we actually need to liquidate those investments over time, whether we want to or not. We need to enjoy retirement. You've worked hard to get here. So what's the strategy to make sure that you do that in the most efficient way? For a lot of people, when we build out retirement plans, one request I get all the time is, Adam, can you guys build out a sequence of return or a Monte Carlo simulation within my plan? And all that shows is what happens if markets go down 30% in year one of retirement, or it's more of a fluctuating market over time. And it says, based on a bunch of variables and many scenarios, usually up to 1,000, here's the likelihood that your portfolio, your investment portfolio, will last over time. Meaning that, how well is your portfolio built? The reality is these things are not controllable. And I always say, wouldn't you rather head into retirement controlling what you can, and the things that are uncontrollable, try and put aside altogether? Sequence of return, Monte Carlo, is all uncontrollable. We don't know when the market's going to crash. We know during your retirement, there will be times when the market is very weak. There might be market crashes. There could be a lot going on. But again, what's the timing? How far does it go down? When do we sell? When do we buy? There's a lot of moving parts that you don't have the crystal ball to. But if you have a really good retirement plan that shows you exactly where your money should come from, how much you can spend, etc., then you can actually build the portfolio to match that cash flow plan. And this is where the idea of a cash wedge comes into play. Now, the term cash wedge could be called many different things. I'm going to use the term cash wedge for this video. And what that alludes to is putting aside 2, 3, 5 years of future income based on the retirement plan in something that's not tied to the stock market, or has a lot less fluctuation and is easily accessible when you need the money. The idea around a cash wedge is, again, put a few years aside of cash flow needs so that if the market does drop 30% in year one of retirement, it doesn't affect the money you take out and the things you want to do. Remember, those go-go years of retirement are not infinite. They are finite. They go from the date you retire to roughly your early to mid 70s. So in that period of time, if you have 2 really bad market years, does that mean that you don't travel those years or do your hobbies or spend the money the way you should? It shouldn't affect you. Yes, on paper, you will see your portfolio go from X to Y and it's dropped in value. But the cash flow you're drawing out is naturally there. You don't have to sell anything in the market at a 20, 30% loss to put food on the table, to go on your travel, to enjoy your go-go years of retirement. And that's really important. And that's why this strategy of having a cash wedge that's built behind your really well-detailed retirement plan, showing you exactly where your money's coming from, will make a big impact. And I talked to someone just the other day. They reached out, they said, Adam, I have a plan. I'm not sure if your team can help. And they sent me a sample. It was one of the big financial institutions here in Canada. And I read it through and I kind of got it, but it was very convoluted. And I just went back to the client and said, look, do you understand where your income's coming from? And he said, I have no idea. I said, well, that's problem number one. I've kind of figured it out. I'd probably have to talk to your advisor to really figure out. And he goes, my advisor couldn't really tell me either. That's not a retirement plan. Your retirement plan should be very clearly laid out, where your money comes from, what buckets, how much, what year, and easy to follow. And that's where the cash wedge comes under it to support that cash flow need. Again, that cash wedge can look many different ways. And when we put together a cash wedge for our client, when we work with our portfolio managers, it really has to tie into how you want it. Do you want your monthly cash flow? Do you want it, semi-annually or annually? There's a lot of moving parts here, but the key is to make sure that that cash wedge comes under the plan to support it. Now, I want to bring in a longtime friend of mine and one of our portfolio managers with BCV Asset Management. Now, BCV is a investment firm based out of Winnipeg, and they've partnered with us for many of our clients. We have about 200 plus households that we service as our team here at Parallel Wealth, where Parallel Wealth does the retirement planning, retirement tax estate planning. BCV is an investment management firm. So all they do is look after the asset management. It's called our retirement income program, and I'll link it below. You can learn more about that. The idea here is let our team build a plan and update that plan and estate plan and tax ongoing, but let's build a plan that shows you exactly where your money needs to come from. BCV then looks after the asset management side of things and works hand in hand with your planner to make sure that the plan ties into the investments. So it's a coming together of two professional firms to work hand in hand with you to give you that white glove retirement service that you need so that you can go enjoy retirement. A lot of you are maybe getting a plan and then the implementation isn't there, or you're just not getting a plan altogether. Our retirement income program brings the two things together. Again, you can learn more. We'll click that link below. So Chris is the portfolio manager at BCV Asset Management, and he actually heads up their fixed income portfolio there at BCV. So we want to welcome Chris to the channel. He's been on here before, but welcome back, Chris.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to have you on the channel again. I know you've been on a few times, but just to start off, we've talked about cash wedge now, but how does BCV, what is the BCV way to build out a cash wedge, protect cash flow for your clients and for our clients through retirement?
Yeah. So for us, cash wedge really does come down to kind of like capital that you need and then what's your risk tolerance where it comes to that. So for us, when we try to ask clients, first question usually is, how much cash do you need and when do you need it? So for me, my range is usually 3 to 5 years worth of a client's cash flow. I like to put in fixed income. You can vary that. You can say I'm being more conservative, I'm going to be more aggressive, but really that's kind of what we like to do. The reason for that is it allows us in times of stress to have an option, right? If we're 100% invested in equities, if the market is down, usually the market is down and you have to sell something at a loss, or you're selling something below what you truly think it's actually worth. So for us, having fixed income, it allows us to have that optionality. So if I buy bonds that are maturing, say, every 6 months or every year, the bond should naturally gravitate towards to 100 cents on the dollar as it comes closer to maturity. Bond funds aren't going to give you that. Bond funds are just a commingling of assets. So you're going to have you're going to have some bonds in there that are shorter term, medium term, and longer term, but it all depends on the movement that you have within all of those bonds to see where the bond pricing of that pool is going to be. When you hold individual securities, if I buy a bond from, let's say, Royal Bank, as it comes due to that maturity date, unless Royal Bank is having some financial troubles, it should migrate back to 100 cents on the dollar. World's going great. World is, going to hell in a handbasket, right? That maturity cycle kind of continues. So that allows us to say, listen, perhaps we might want to roll this bond. Perhaps we might want to use this as the cash flow for clients. But it gives me that option where I don't have to sell a certain security. We could use that security that naturally comes due and populates the client's account with cash.
And oftentimes when we build a plan and we kind of communicate that with your guys' team, say, look, Sally needs $30,000 out of RIF for the year. A lot of times you guys look at the portfolio and say, okay, well, there's going to be $15,000 coming out in dividends. And so we'll buy a $15,000 bond, one that matures kind of every year for the next 3, 5+ years. And then that cash flow is naturally coming in. So, which again, has been a great structure for our clients. It kind of takes that market fear away. And I've said many times on this channel of a lot of people ask for sequence of return risk and Monte Carlo simulation. And it's all these what if scenarios. It's well, those are things you can't control. So why don't you actually control the process, have a good plan, and then build your portfolio to kind of match that plan? So, and you guys have done a great job kind of partnering with our clients on that.
For us, the portfolio naturally kicks off a lot of cash flow anyways. So if you have a client that is, has about, let's say, $1 million in an account, and they want to draw out, say, $50,000 a year. Well, if we're going to say that, then we perhaps say, hey, 250,000 of this portfolio should be put aside in fixed income that has a natural ladder to the maturity cycle. Mm-hmm. On top of that, the portfolio generates cash. Dividends come in from the equities that are held in the account, interest payments from fixed income, or payment from the alternative pool. All of that goes, and let's say that accounts to $25,000 or $30,000. So I don't need all of the heavy lifting to come from just the equities increasing in value. I have a lot of a client's payment, kind of coming in, within just a natural cash flow of a portfolio. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we might need to supplement it with bonds that are coming due, but perhaps not all of it. And if we could say, hey, maybe equities are cheap, we'll take the rest of that and buy more equities. Or, hey, let's just buy another bond at the end of the ladder to extend it so that later on down the road, we have that cash flow coming in further on down the path. So it gives us the option is what it is. No one really wants to say that, we're going to be going up and to the right every year. That's not realistic. But if you have that cash flow naturally coming in, it helps alleviate some of the stress that clients have as they enter retirement. Honestly, like the idea of this portfolio is to grow, is to be the most aggressive it can be. As you're accumulating, perhaps that's someone's mentality, but in retirement, and when we start using this as a paycheck vehicle as you retire, the focus does kind of come out on saying like, okay, how am I going to get my cash flow to me? And this is an easy way to kind of say, yeah, we are able to say, bonds are coming due, we have cash flow coming in. If the market's not agreeing with us, perhaps, it takes a bit of stress out of people's lives.
Yeah. They see it on their statement, but yeah, it avoids them having to sell at a loss. So, which ties us into like when and how do you refill that cash wedge? Mm-hmm. And you touch on it a little bit, but maybe dig into that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had 2 phenomenal years here, so perhaps this is the time where you say, hey, my portfolio has outperformed where I think it should be. My equities are now more than what my original investment policy statement has said that they should be. Let's perhaps sell some of those, refill in the backing of the ladder portfolio. So on fixed income, we'll have bonds that are maturing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But perhaps we're overweight equities just because they've grown so much in 2 solid years of performance. Mm-hmm. Perhaps we bring down that allocation and buy 9th and 10th years so that we can kind of have that ladder more filled up and we have a full allocation to equities. Perhaps if a client has an influx of cash, perhaps they aren't needing all of the dividends or interest that have been paid to them. It's always good to reinvest back in the portfolio for when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what are some common mistakes that you guys see that you try to avoid essentially as you build out a client portfolio and try and match that portfolio obviously to the retirement plan that's been put together?
Yeah. I mean, some people, the cash wedge, they take the literal, definition and say like, oh, I have to hold cash. Not really, right? I mean, cash will drag on performance. It will just eat away at the purchasing power that you have. GICs are okay for people who are really risk adverse, but I mean, they're very infrequently going to be a great return above that of inflation. So, people who have perhaps too much in an ultra safe account, I could see that dragging on it. Might make you feel good, but perhaps if you look back and say, perhaps, if we invested in a different vehicle, maybe for not as much, returns might have looked differently. But it does tend to be, people will have a number that they want to have in their bank account. And for some people, the number is, 6 months of payments. For other people, it's like 2-3 years of payments. Yeah. And the bank, God bless them, they're not going to give you too much money for holding money in their checking account. So use that money, invest it in something that you feel safe holding, but will generate an income for you that can help offset, cost of living expenses.
Yeah. And GICs, cash, like they're all options. And that's one thing that I love for my clients with BCV is that they don't have to worry about that. And that you guys buy those individual bonds, like very unique to market. Not a lot of portfolio managers buy that. If your money's sitting at the bank, you're getting a bond fund, which you touched on earlier in the downfalls of those. But that's been a huge advantage of owning those individual bonds, no maturity date, and kind of walking through that retirement. And again, the whole idea of a cash wedge is to take away market risk in retirement, right? As far as your cash flow goes, you're going to see the markets up and down. Like if you're retiring at 60, you live till 90, you're going to see many down markets. You can't avoid them. You can't time them. You don't have a crystal ball. But if you have a good plan, you can plan for that cash flow, right? And so that's the whole idea behind it. And again, the bonds, the dividends, all that kind of ties nicely into creating that nice consistent cash flow.
I mean, I got a lot of feedback during COVID when, actually post-COVID, once inflation started to come up and then interest rates kind of increased. People were saying, "Oh my goodness, Chris, bonds can go down." Yes, they can, right? I mean, bonds are a capital market instrument that will go based upon the buys and sells of market participants. When you kind of look through that, though, fixed income has usually a maturity date at the end where it says, "Hey, this date, this bond is going to be coming due." And unless there is an issue with that company, right? Bell Canada, Rogers, Royal Bank, these are highly capitalized businesses. And this is an agreement between you and the bank. It's a loan, right? You're lending that institution some money. So as we kind of say, yeah, they can move around, but as long as these institutions are healthy, right, there should be a payment at the end and a repayment of the face value of that bond. So it allows clients, I would hope, to say, yeah, listen, it can move around, but these are great institutions that we're lending money to. And while it can move, this is all part of the plan and has been taken into consideration.
Well, we'll cap it off there just so we don't get too long-winded here. But yeah, thank you for joining us, Chris. Again, for those of you entering retirement, once you get a plan in place, that's kind of step one. Step two is the implementation. And cash flow planning is a massive part of it. So make sure you have this cash wedge, whatever it looks like for you. It could be different. Again, if you need help with that, reach out to our office. Love to help you. We can talk about the retirement income program, which integrates Chris, Richard, and their team at BCV Asset Management, and just making everything to come together. Again, retirement should be enjoyable. And for a lot of you, even with a plan, you're stressing out of where everything comes from. So a good solid plan, again, aligned with Chris and their team there, has done a great job for our clients. So again, thank you for joining us in this video, and we'll see you in the next one.